your knowledge boosted around ecology and practical skills around building ponds for nature. And yeah, the 4B's Biodiversity Initiative has a clear mission, which is to help people and nature thrive together. And tonight we're going to support that mission by hearing how to build ponds for nature. We're also going to hear from our own neighbours in our own community about what it's like to actually do that and build a pond. We'll also hear about the levels of biodiversity by looking at the data that we're collecting, and you'll be able to ask questions and even register for your own free pond starter kit. So, yay! But without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our headliner. He's qualified in zoology, conservation, ecology, teaching, parenting. He's had roles at the Surrey Wildlife Trust and as the head ranger at the City of London. And I give you Paul Ritchie.
Does that work right? Can you hear me? Yeah, I hope so. Hi. So apart from all of that, I'm a neighbour as well. So some of you may have been to our garden in Brockham for Open Gardens. So we live just on the edge of the fields over there, and you can recognise our house because we've got a really brilliant new shed and solar panels on the roof. So if you've not been there, we do Open Garden every year in June. So please come along if you've not been before. Yeah, I don't know how to, whether I can live up to that. But I'm here to talk about ponds. Ponds are a bit of a passion of mine. I worked with a team, including the Environment Agency and Epsom Council, doing a river restoration project on Ashley Common and Epsom Commons, and a key part of that was ponds, and it was great to watch them change over time. But this is on a much smaller scale. So hopefully, feel free to ask questions. Do you want to do the questions at the end? Would you prefer the questions at the end?
Yeah. We can make time at the end, but if something relevant comes up,
yeah, just shout out or hands up, maybe better. So why are we here? Why is 4Bs? Why does it exist? Why are we all sat in this room? Well, national surveys, and this isn't just Surrey, this one's for Surrey, but not just Surrey, across the whole UK, not good picture. It's really not a good picture. When you look at the amount under the red, orange and yellow categories, we're not doing that well really. And that's been a story for a long time. It was the case when I was a student. I started conservation quite a few years ago, 1977, and it hasn't really improved that much. So we're still playing catch up. Why is it an issue? What are the threats? What are the things I'm concerned about in my role? Insects. We talk about climate change and global warming, but we are facing an impending extinction event with insects, not just in this country, across most of the world really. So that's a bit of an issue. It's not just rare species either. We tend to focus on rare species. When I started in conservation as a student, it was the panda and the blue whale, and we've had some success with those. But this little bird here, anyone recognise it? House sparrow, yeah. So house sparrow was really common. It's still fairly common in some places. I live in Nutwood Avenue, and there's, I think, probably about 15-20 families of house sparrows on that estate because there's a significant number of neighbours who have not cut the hedges down. But in the drive for smarter gardening and all these gardening programmes, we tend to chop hedges down and replace them with fences, and so they require nesting habitat. So they're on a decline, and they're not a particularly rare species, but they're becoming rarer. And the reason we're here today to talk about ponds is because a lot of aquatic life is doing really badly. Frogs, toads, newts. and the insects that are found there. So it's very easy for me to show these slides and to give you that information, and we all get very despondent and go home feeling depressed. But I'm hoping you'll see as we go on that we can actually do something about this. So what are the threats? What are the things that are really affecting wildlife? Well, pollution, particularly ponds. They seem to be a place that people love to throw rubbish in. Chucking old supermarket trolleys and waste materials. They dry up. Some seasonal ponds, like the one at Buckland, it comes up and down every year. But significantly ponds are drying up, and ponds that have been created with limers are often not maintained. The limers crack and they degrade. I hope you don't have this in your experience when you start a pond, but blanket weed and algae. Does anyone know why that's a problem, why that happens? Does anyone know the reason, the two main reasons why you have a problem with algae and blanket weed in your pond?
I thought it was rock vegetation.
Yeah, so nutrient levels, high nutrient levels is one.
Also oxygen.
Yeah, well that's an outcome of the process, but yes, that is relevant. The other thing to do is heat, and I mention these now because they become more apparent later on when we talk about planting. Well, that's important. So, water that's too warm and too high nutrient levels. But you can do something about it, and you don't need to use chemicals, and you don't need to chuck loads of barley in your pond. So since 1950, lost about 50% of ponds in the UK. So that's not a good scenario to be in. So what's the answer? Well, from the conservation organisations' point of view, people like the Wildlife Trusts, the RSPB, Natural England, living landscapes is the thing. This idea that we don't just try and conserve species, we don't just look at little pocket nature reserves, but we look at the entire landscape. I'm joined up, and I say when I started in conservation, it's very much a species focused: blue whale, panda, maybe a rare bird. Nowadays we're into systems and landscapes, which is a far more efficient way. And of course, 4Bs as an organisation recognises that, because you're working together as 4 communities over a broader landscape, and that is the way forward. And you can see from this little image, I like this little image because it's got everything we've got here, haven't we? There's a field, there's little allotments there, there's gardens, there's a little park, there's a stream, we're lucky to have a river and streams. So it's about looking at that entire system, and for us as homeowners is where do our homes, where do our gardens fit within that system? And it's about making space for nature, giving it room to not only survive but to breed and to proliferate. That would be our idea. And you can help with that by creating a pond, which is why we're here tonight to talk about ponds. So Simon wanted a bit about ecology. Ecology, if you're not an ecologist, it can be quite a dry subject. And I came up with a slide quite a few years ago as a way of showing about how we can all contribute and help with this. So if you imagine those little dots are areas where wildlife might live. It might be a park, it might be a verge, it might be a farm, it might be a garden. It's a traffic light system. The green ones are doing quite well, the amber ones are not doing as well, and the red ones are under threat. And historically what would have happened is the people who looked after those areas would have worked away, trying to improve it, do their thing, probably not talk to their neighbour, not talk to another organisation, but the living landscapes approach is changing that. And what you would be seeking to do is to work on the land and the properties and the farmland and the woods and things around those areas, so joining them up. So creating a bigger island and ultimately working together in a living landscape. And that sort of connectivity is good for wildlife because things don't stay in one place. They don't stay in those nature reserves. They don't even stay in your garden. And anyone who lives locally, if you've got a wildlife garden, will know I've had marble whites come down off the downs out of the quarry. They move over quite large distances, even quite small animals. So where do our gardens fit in there? There you go, Box Hill, Buckland, Betchworth and Brockham. And there's my pond. And hopefully your ponds will contribute to that process. And my pond provides a stepping stone, if you like, a lily pad almost, for leapfrogging from one area to another. And I have dragonflies come in the garden, that come out of the lake at Buckland Park. I have damselflies and dragonflies come off the River Mole to visit. And by creating a pond, you're creating that staging post and you're providing that resilience, if you like, within that whole system. So that is why gardens are important. They form an integral part of that. And you may have heard me say this before, you may have read it somewhere, but by no uncertain terms, the biggest potential nature reserve in the entire country are all our gardens joined up. The area covered by people's gardens is larger than national parks. So we can have a real influence on wildlife. So, wetland, that's my pond, looking across to my neighbours. But it doesn't have to be a large pond, so you'll see when I show you the illustration of building this pond, it's quite a large pond, but you don't have to have a large pond. This is a bucket pond. It's an old barrel that's been cut in half and lined and sunk into the ground, and has got some bricks in it and some plants growing in it. So you've all got a bucket pond, out of interest? Yeah. Have you got stuff going with it?
Yeah, you helped me build it. It had bricks to raise the plants.
Yeah, it was a bit of a loaded question because I was hoping. Yeah. No, so you do get stuff in it, and you get stuff quite quickly.
Oh yeah, within a month we had mosquito larvae and
Has anyone got an allotment here? Anyone got an allotment? Has anyone left out a bucket or a bowl or anything on their allotment and found stuff in it? Because that's the usual story. And frogs will use it, they'll lay their eggs in it and all sorts of stuff. So it doesn't take, and I'll show you when I get to the slides about building a pond, things inhabit water really, really quickly. So the key will be, as we will talk about later, is plants, getting the right plants in. So what sort of wildlife? Well, when I wrote this, we'll visit the pond, they actually does visit the pond, what sort of things do we see? So, insects, some say I'm a zoologist, passionate about bees, wild bees, and insects, so I love insects. But invertebrates, and they fly around and they move around. So dragonflies and damselflies are the obvious first ones. Anyone know what that one is? I like to test my audience. It's a broad-body chaser. So it's a female, beautiful golden colour. The male you might see more, they're blue. They're like a sky blue colour. Beautiful dragonflies. They're quite common, but they're such a joy to see when you dug a pond. And this was very early on in this pond. And she came along and she was dipping in amongst those plants there, laying her eggs. Pond skaters, whirligig beetles, water boatmen, these are all insects, they all fly. I think sometimes people don't realise that, even ones that live in water. They all have wings, they all fly. They will find your pond really, really quickly. Obviously water snails don't. They tend to come in on the plants and things that you bring in, but the insects do. So invertebrates, you all know what that is?
No.
Yeah, so it's a dragonfly larvae. So damsel dragonfly larvae. You don't see them so easily unless you're clearing out your pond and you're pulling plants out, because they live in your pond and they're hunting and they're feeding on things in the pond. And whereas the adults obviously are more visible because they're flying around. Amphibians. Yes, so anyone know what that one is? Frog? Yeah. That one? Does anyone like picking up amphibians? Or there's a few faces being pulled, yeah. People say to me, oh, they're slimy, they're slimy. Frogs do have secretion on their outside, but toads are really dry. They're quite feisty as well. We've got a few toads in the garden, really large one, and they're great because they eat slugs, things that you don't want. And that one, anyone know what that is? Yeah, it's a newt, yeah. So in our garden at home we have smooth newt and great crested newt. There are great crested newts in our area. Must be because it didn't come into, it appeared one year, so it must be coming from somewhere. I know they travel about 4 kilometres, they will do, but somewhere else in this area there must be pollen with great crested newts in, because it found us last year. The thing to bear in mind as well is we're here to talk about ponds and talk about digging ponds and stuff, but please don't forget, as you can see on this slide, this other stuff, the other habitats that wildlife in ponds need. Particularly things like amphibians. They only really go into the water to breed. The bulk of their life is outside, so newts spend the vast majority of their time roaming around in other areas. So you need to provide them places to go. You need to provide them areas of uncut grass that they'll feel safe in coming out of the pond so they don't get eaten by magpies. You need log piles that they can hide under, stone piles. So please don't forget that, not just around the pond. When I talk about wildlife gardening generally, I talk about log piles and stuff, and I always say to people, you can tuck them, they don't have to be right in the pond, you can tuck them in the edge of the hedge, they can be in a corner, by the shed, somewhere where they'll find somewhere to overwinter. Compost piles, hay ricks. If you've been in our garden, you'll see we have hay rick composting things, so you'll know what I'm talking about. They're great, they're going there. Somewhere where they can overwinter, they won't get eaten, and they can avoid the bad temperature. Please avoid chemicals. One of the biggest threats to amphibians are the use of chemicals. Farmers often get a lot of stick about using chemicals, but actually the horticultural industry and gardeners are worse offenders, because farmers have to go through training courses and they have lots of restrictions on them. Gardeners don't, almost no. And I was telling you for now is there is no such thing as a specific herbicide. Do not believe what it says on the packaging. It's nonsense. So if you want to have amphibians in your garden, you need to stop using chemicals and certainly not use them near your water, because they don't necessarily dissipate quickly. Reptiles. Everyone likes snakes. So we have grass snake in the garden. It's not a grass snake, it's a water snake. So we see it in the pond. It's looking around for newts and things to eat and frogs. Slow worm. Not a snake, a legless lizard. Common lizards we don't get at home. And again, compost piles, log piles, reptiles love them. That's a slow worm if you're not familiar with them. I think most people have slow worms in their garden, to be honest. And if you have compost piles, you definitely will, because they go in there to keep warm. Birds, I'd love to have a kingfisher in the garden. I've not had one in the garden, but you will see them on the mole. I'll see them regularly. The only person I know with a pond who has a kingfisher on it is Martin Smith, who's got a very large pond. Brilliant. Excellent. What I do get is wagtails and a whole variety of other birds that come down to drink and feed. We don't get worried with a heron. I've got a metal heron that I was given when I left the Wildlife Trust by the team. It works. We have heron flying over. It never comes down to the pond. So I thought it was a bit of a myth, but it does seem to work. I've never been visited by one. But lots of songbirds, but no kingfisher. And robins. Obviously using it as a water source. Just as an aside for water, because we are talking about water features and not just ponds, if you can, don't just rely on having one bird bath. Try and have more than one bird bath and try and put them in different places, because different birds like drinking water in different ways. So we actually have 3 old metal dustbin lids upside down, and we find that the one near the hedge is used by the house sparrows because they feel safe, they come out, drink and go back again. We have another one that's used by pigeons and magpies and jackdaws and all of those, and then we have another one that's hidden that's used by the robin and the wrens and the ducks. So if you can, think about water in its broadest sense. Mammals, I get asked the question about if I build a pond, when I get loads of gnats and midges and stuff. Well, you will get midges and stuff, but stuff eats them, including bats. And bats eat a huge amount. So every summer we have pipistrelles mainly on the estate flying around. They come and fly around our pond and our neighbours' ponds eating midges. We have a hedgehog. We have more than one hedgehog because we can hear their exploits. They're quite noisy. If you've ever heard hedgehogs, when they get together, they are quite noisy. They need somewhere to drink as well. We get fox come through the garden when the dogs are not there. And again, they're drinking. So they're all of interest. They're all, as a zoologist, they're all things. And they're really why I make ponds and why I did conservation, is because for my passion was animals. And I wanted to see animals. And I know it really quickly. They're really hard to find unless you can attract them in. So I started creating things to attract them into my garden and into my nature reserves. So, plants. So they're fundamentally, so we've talked about the things that we want to come in, the things that we've around the animals we want to see, we'd like to see. There's nothing more pleasurable, I think, than sitting next to a pond and watching the stuff going on, watching the insects fly, watching the birds come. But the key to it, the key thing, apart from having clean water, is about having the right plants in the right way. And this is probably one of the most important slides in the whole presentation, really, because this slide demonstrates the basic ecological principle that Simon wanted me to push across, and it applies to all habitats, whether this is a pond, a beach, a woodland ride, lawn, grassland, meadow area. Wildlife does best and thrives best with the most variety if you have layers. Really, layers. Just layers. So it doesn't matter what it is. So if you've got a grass and a lawn and you might not want to, you want to cut some of your lawn, not having different layers of grass is good. Different grasshoppers, different crickets like different lengths of layer, different insects use it. So layers. Where if you have a woodland, you want more layers. You want canopy trees, sub-canopy trees. So, and in a pond, you want depths, because different plants grow at different depths. Now, she's not here. If you make a pond with a bucket, you create those layers by putting things in it, like bricks and stones. If you're digging it, you do it by stepping it. And it's really important. So you get, on the far left-hand side, you get the plants that are growing up the bottom of the ponds, the lilies. And then as you go up, you'll see the depths change, different plants. And then on the edge, you have the marginal emergent plants and the marginal plants. They're really important because the different plants thrive in different water levels. So that creates variety in the plants. Variety in the plants creates variety of the animals, because the animals are coming to use different plants. So it's really important. And you're thinking about, in a simplest term, three main habitats which are shown on the right there. So deep water, shallow water, and the edge. And if you really want to get carried away, you can make yourself a little bog garden and stick it on the edge as well. So it's like a pond, full of soil, but it's waterlogged. And so certain plants will thrive in that. See if I can get rid of that stupid. Just didn't realise that was up there. I'm really sorry. Let's get rid of it. Right. And those at the bottom are the most vital plants of all. If you've got a limited budget when you're starting off, please don't spend loads of money buying all the beautiful emergent ones and the edges. You need to invest your money on the oxygenators. We've already talked about algae, we talked about temperature, we talked about nutrient levels. The oxygenated plants, they're not necessarily that interesting to look at. Some of them are, but not all of them. They can be quite boring, the things that are floating in the water. They are drawing nutrients out of the water to grow. They're releasing oxygen at a certain part of the day, so they're oxygenating the water, and they are effectively purifying your pond. You don't need expensive pumps and the things and filters that you see in fish ponds. If you have the right amount of these plants, they do the job for you. So oxygenators are really important, and the guys on the committee, the group, are probably fed up with hearing me say it, because I say every time I talk to them, don't forget the oxygenators, don't forget the oxygenators, because they are the reason, not having enough of them, or not having them at all, the reason why a lot of ponds fail on their first attempt. So there you are. They're not particularly exciting necessarily, but they are really vital to the system. So They go left to right, and they're down to hornwort. It's like a native pondweed. Just floats. You can buy it. I was saying to Simon earlier, I'll give him the details of the supply, but it comes in a little plastic bag. It looks really boring. Open up, chuck it in, and go back 3 weeks later, it's everywhere. It's great. It grows really fast, and it's doing a really good job. It's filtering the water in your new pond. Water starwort, middle one, pennywort, marsh pennywort on the right. The marsh pennywort grows in the shallow water. So the one on the left, the hornwort, is free floating in the deep water. The one on the right sits on the surface of the bed. The one on the far right then is growing in the marginal areas. This one's a bit more interesting. It's got a lovely flower. It's a member of the buttercup family. So crowfoot. Mare's tail is the bloody one, not the horsetail that everyone complains about on their allotments. This is actually a water plant. Again, it's an emergent one. And the little one, frog bit down the bottom, is like a little floating, free floating plant. It has like little roots that come out and float around in the water. It draws the nutrients out, and it goes down and disappears at the end of the season and comes back again. But quite an interesting one. But all of those plants, all 6 plants, are all performing an important function. So they are taking nutrients out of the water, which, if you remember what I said about the 2 key things for algae, too much nutrient, too much temperature. The oxygenators are taking the nutrients out. The floating plants are lowering the temperature. So having water lilies, broadleaf pondweed, frog bit, a bit of one water, anything that covers the surface, even duckweed. And people freak out about duckweed. Duckweed is a bit of an indicator of high nutrient, but it does serve a purpose, unlike the algae, in the fact that it helps shade the water, it lowers the temperature underneath, which is really good for helping to control algae.
So you have a pond covered in duck.
Sorry?
So it's good to have a pond covered.
People freak out about duckweed. I hear it all the time, and people get really. If you manage your pond, if you have oxygenators in it, if you lower the keep the temperature lower, and if you lower your oxygenators there, nutrient levels, duckweed gradually subsides. And I get duckweed on my pond. Some years it comes back, and then other years it's not so much. I've never treated it. I've never got rid of it. It's in a balanced system. It's fine. Only these plants, like most plants, to be honest, only become a problem if we put them into a monoculture or a system that's not in balance. The reason people have loads of uncontrollable weeds in their gardens or on their fields is because they clear all the other plants away and they give them space. Nature doesn't like space. So if you ram your pond full of stuff, there's no space, then you might get duckweed, but it won't get out of control. You can't actually stop it coming in because it comes in on birds anyway. So marginal plants, they're the ones that were on the far right of the other slide. So yellow flag iris is a beautiful plant, like a purple loosestrife. It's great, soft brush and reedgrass. Be really, really careful about marginal plants. There's a number of ponds in this area, in our community, people put bulrush in. And it's the wrong plant. It's the reed mace, yeah. It's the wrong plant for most ponds. You know, this is a plant that you would expect to see in the fens in Norfolk. In large expensive. Don't put it in ponds. It's a nightmare. It's really hard to control. So go for smaller stuff. Go for soft brush. Go for the sweet reedgrass. They're all native plants. Lesser pond stage, much smaller. They perform the same function. They do need controlling because they will expand, but not to the same extent, and they're much easier to manage. And also, if you have excess, and be careful about moving plants around. But if you've got another pond, you can take some out, put it in your other pond. You wouldn't want to be moving reed mace around. Absolute nightmare stuff. It's right for the right place. Watermint. Has anyone got watermint at home? How'd you find it?
I used to nick things out of wild ponds, so it just came from a wild pond. But it's nice.
It is beautiful.
It hasn't overspread.
No, because that's the concern, that it spreads. But again, in a balanced system, it doesn't. The stuff eats it.
The bees like it.
Yeah, the bees do like it. It's a really good nectar source. So I always put the question mark because I often have a question about, well, then it gets out of control watermint, but it's And you can use it like other mint, so depends on your forage. Wetland and bog plants, ragged robin. Does anyone have ragged robin at home? Does it grow around your pond? No. Where does it grow? Everywhere but the pond in our garden. So they put this up as a pond plant. We had it around the pond. I planted it there originally. It's now in various places. It just seems to pop up around the garden, but not near the pond. But it's a beautiful plant. I love it. Creeping jenny, water avens we have at home. That's done really, really well. The purple loosestrife. Pendulous sedge. Anyone know what it means by pendulous sedge? Anyone not like it? Because it can spread. I use it at home. You might see on some slides. We use it at home to give the illusion that a pond is bigger than it is, because it's a wet woodland plant. It doesn't actually need to have its feet in water, just likes damp conditions, but it can cope. It does spread, but we use it a bit deceptively. So we have a boardwalk at the back of our pond, and the other side of the flower bed we've got pendulous sedge. It makes the pond look much bigger. So what features do we want? So this is a quick fly visit on how I created our pond. So marking it out, we marked it out: stakes, split string, rope, flower, anything you like really. I think I used, I had to get a long bit of rope. I used the rope originally. I lifted all the turfs, put them to one side, stacked them, and I started digging out my layers. I started with the edge. I found my edge where I wanted it to be. Started there. People get daunted about digging ponds, but bear in mind, you know, why dig a pond out completely, have a big pile of soil and get rid of? Why don't you dig out half the pond and pile the soil around your pond and come up? Which is what we did. Then no soil needs to go off site, and half the amount of digging. Bear in mind, I've done that myself. Anything that's going to make my life easier is a good thing. So you can see, I started digging out and piling the soil around the edge. Not a steep bank, I've graded it, because when you see it at the end, you'll see it then sort of merges into the rest of the garden. It might be a safety issue. You might want to make it higher, raise it up. You might have small children, you might have small grandchildren. So you might actually want a pond but be concerned about that. A pond that's built up with a bank around it, and vegetation on it's harder to run in and pitch headfirst into. Some people choose to have a raised pond and build it within a frame, but just something to bear in mind. And when you're digging out, think about the thickness of your liner and the other things you're putting in. It's very easy to dig out the pond and go, whoa, I see, I've got it to the right depth, and you've forgotten that you're going to put all the stuff in, and then when you put it in, you realise your pond's not as deep. See how I said that with some meaning? Because I've done that myself. I did it with this one, but you learn, don't you, as you go on. So that was it when it was finished, from the point of view of digging. So you can see the turf recovered really quickly. The bank is there. You've got some layers, and you've got a deep bit. It was about just under 2 metres at the deepest point from the highest edge. I think it was about 1.8, I think, from memory. You can see down in this bottom left-hand corner, I'm already thinking about other habitats. So we've got a number of trees in the garden. We were cutting some, and the elm started to die again. It got Dutch elm disease, so I'm cutting it, already stacking material next to the pond to provide other habitats. If you read pond guides, they talk about putting sand in to protect the liner. You can use carpets. The only thing I would say is, if you're built in some places, depending where you are, you don't want to be using man-made material. You want to be using the Hessian back carpet, because it will gradually degrade. But we found a whole load of carpet. Previous owners of the house had kindly left us in the loft. And rather than take it to the tip, I just cut it up and I used it to lay on top of the surface. Then we covered it, and when you buy liners, they come with these like sheets. So that's the like the felty type soft material gone over the top of the carpets, and then the liner on top. Just a hint: don't cut your liner until you've filled your pond, because you'll cut it and think that's right, neat. You want to get it finished, and you put the water gets in it, and then it all goes down, and then suddenly you see the edge of your ponds drifting down into the pond. So leave all the excess there, fill it with water, and then trim it and tidy it up at the end. And what I actually did was, once it was full, I cut the pond off where I wanted it, pulled the turfs back, tucked the liner underneath the turfs back on top, and then you couldn't see the liner. So we can have a whole debate about how you fill it. We were having a conversation on the group about filling it. That filled with rain. That bit. So it rained overnight. Came back and sat in it. And when I went and looked in it, there was some water boatmen, a diving beetle, and there was a newt. I did get it filled, as you'll see in a minute, but I didn't fill it with tap water. And this is about working with neighbours and the benefit of working. So I'm assuming some people in the room will have heard of BERT. So there are a mad group of people in my village who like into all sorts of stuff and anti-flooding, and they have pumps. And Simon Budd wanted to do pump training with his young BERT volunteers, and the ditch was that side of our garden was full of water, so they all came with their pumping equipment and they all did pump training, and they filled up my pond with ditch water, as you'll see in a minute. So, cheating. There we go. So that's what it looked like when they filled it. And you can see I've cut it off and I've tucked the liner underneath the turf around the edge. So that's the basic thing. You see there's a little bit of gravel and stuff in there to make it like a little beach at this end. That was all waste material from building work that I'd washed off and left out in the rain to get the salt. Because the thing to bear in mind is, guys, when you buy stuff, where does most of our gravel and ballast come from? Sea, yeah. It's dredged off the sea bottom. So it's impregnated with salt, which you don't want in your pond. So if you're going to get it from there, you need to wash it or clean it off, or ideally, like we tend to use old stuff that's been sitting around. So my wife is a very good scrounger. She's always scavenging stuff. So there's always people who have spare stuff that's been sat around for a while. So we tended to use that. But just be aware of that it may have a high salt content. So I dug this in 2018. The team came and pumped and filled it up, I think, in January. So this is the first spring, going to the first spring. So it's been filled. It's got some marginal plants around the edge. Again, this is about what you know. I cheated because I'd already picked up. I said earlier I did a river restoration project when I worked for the City of London, and there was a supplier, I don't think they're there anymore, over by Kingfisher Farm Shop. They do pond plants and wetland plants, but they used to supply to the trade. So I got some queer rolls that were all pre-impregnated with plants, so they grow quite quickly. So I put those in. So that's it in 2019, going into the first spring. This is what it looked like 4 years. So that's what came. Quite quickly, diving beetles, ponds, soldier flies. Quite a good response in the first year. That's what it looked like 4 years later. It can be really quick. But make sure, the key thing is what you can't see in there, and I can't make it out, is that darker bit that's in the middle on the left is just stuffed full of hornworm, masses of oxygenators. Really, I can't labour that point enough. The reason why the pond's done so well is because we invested in oxygenators. So before we move on to Kevin, do you want to do my questions now, or do you want to? Has anyone got any questions place. It's a bit of a whistle-stop tour. It's quite hard. I used to teach pond courses for Wildlife Trust, and there were three separate days, sort of 5 hours each. It's quite hard to try and cram that into a single presentation. But has anyone got any questions at this point? Yeah.
Where do you suggest we buy these plants from?
I'm going to give the link. So there are a couple of places that I've used.
Nearby?
No, but they will post to you.
Oh, okay.
So you don't need to go and get them. So I'll give the thing, because I used to use them for nature reserves. I know they're native species, and they are reliable from the point of view that you won't get any nasties in them.
Will you give us a list of, priority plants?
Yeah.
What are the best ones to
Yeah,
get?
I'll give the link to the web. The website's really good
Right.
because they describe all the plants by character, by zone. So marginal plants, oxygenators, and they list them all. And you can get mixer packs. The thing I'd say is follow the advice they give about numbers. Don't look at it and go, that's not enough, I'll get more. Because I did that. And I ended up with far more than needed. So yeah, so they do give good advice. They'll give advice about numbers. So
What is the company? Just
it's called Wildflowers, something like that. I can't remember off the top of my head. They don't just do pond plants, but they've got a really, really good aquatic plant section. You've got
local place called Lilies in Newdigate.
yeah, there is. They use
I've always had really good service there.
yeah, but you got to think of where my background. So I'm having to plant on nature reserves. I can't buy from normal commercial providers because I can't be sure what else they've got in there. So that's why I'm giving this for some people. Depends how purist you want to be. Obviously I am because of my background. So the supplier I'm recommending only provides native species and they're clean. But my biggest concern, and we were talking about this on the site actually, weren't we, about plants, be careful about transferring plants. There's a natural tendency to want to share stuff and transfer stuff, but we've got crassula in these ponds here. The one on Buckland is full of it, the one on Brockham opposite the butchers is full of it. It's highly invasive, non-native species. It's almost impossible to eradicate, and it grows from the smallest bit. And I blanch every time I see people working in those ponds because I'm always concerned about whether they're doing biosecurity and they're cleaning their boots off and they're washing everything off, because it'll stick to the boots and you'll go to another pond and it's in another pond. And aquatic plants, weeds.
Paul, can I help on that?
Yeah,
At Buckland, the events that are held are run by the Reigate Area Conservation Volunteers. And the guy who leads the group and leads the event
It's really strict to me.
is really strict because it's Simon Elson.
It is, yeah.
And that's why the events are run by him, not by the local villagers.
I thought that would be the case.
Because of the crassula.
Yeah.
And in fact, this year, because the pond was so dry, there were no events.
No.
Because the judgment was that people going into the pond would do more damage than they would, in terms of controlling, getting the crassula out, given the dryness, there'd be more damage.
Yeah, I haven't seen Simon for ages. I wasn't sure if he's still about, so I know how strict he is.
He wrote the pond plan, and that's the basis on which it's managed. But we do take a lot of stick from people who drive by. Someone asked earlier in the year, it's a funny time to choose to empty it. So,
Well, okay.
What does this stuff look like?
It's really small. It's like, I haven't got a picture of it here. I'll provide you with a picture. It's a really small little plant, but it grows like mad, and it fragments, and it will grow from really small fragments. It's from New Zealand originally.
Sorry.
That was negative. Because we've given... Yeah, but we've given you back some horrible stuff as well. We're really bad at it.
yeah, we've given you rabbits.
Yeah. Horticulturalists, through time, from Victorian time onwards, a nightmare. Yeah.
Scientists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Question.
Yeah.
So, when you put the bottom of plastic lining, you talk about beach, but do you not need to put stuff at the bottom?
You can, yeah. So well, you do recommend now that you put stuff back in. So if you're digging a big pond, a large pond, and you're putting a butyl liner in, you do all the things I've said, and then you put your soil back in, and then you let it fill up, and then you can plant in it. You can't see there is what I did, was I put it back like that, and then I had all these old, I can't remember where I got them from, all these old Hessian sacks that I filled up with low nutrient soil and compost that I stitched up, making like sandbags. Then I cut holes in them, put the plants in, and then I put them in the bottom of the pond.
That was my second question. So you want the plants grip onto it?
Well, so they need, so the things that are rooted into the ground that would normally root straight in the ground, and you wouldn't be a liner, would they? They would be growing in a pond that would be clay lined and stuff. They grow into the soil. So you need to provide them with that. Floating ones obviously don't need that.
Soil in the pond as well.
Yeah. So enough things to root into.
Okay, so you put plastic down, put soil on top.
Yeah. So what you do? So the reason I didn't do it with the plastic is because if you put the soil back in, you've got to sift it all and get all the stones out, which will damage the plastic liner. If you've got a butyl liner that's slightly thicker, which you do if you're building a big pond, like when I was doing nature reserves, it's a lot easier. So you put it in, you'd cover it again with a fabric sheet, like terram or something, and then you put your soil back on top of it, and effectively what you created then is an impervious layer, and things will just then grow in the soil.
What kind of soil do you use?
Well, when I built it before, I just used the soil that was there, because that's what you would get in a pond. But if you're going to stock a small pond, then you want low nutrients. No good putting in high nutrient compost, because you'll raise the nutrient level, and then you'll have a problem with algae. So you need nutrient free. So you'll see what I put in there was all hard material. So it was like sand, and ballast and gravel. It just provides a medium for the plants to root in.
Is sand good enough? It's got plenty of sand. Sand good enough?
Yeah, but not builder sand. So you've got to be careful with this. So not builder sand. So white sand, sharp sand, but not builder sand. Not the stuff that you use for making mortar, because it changes the pH of the water. So you need inert materials.
Build a sand underneath the line.
You can, yeah. Build a sand underneath, but not directly in the water.
And if you've got I've got a lot of red clay, which I'm going to hit as I'm digging, is that good for growing plants in?
The plants will grow in clay. All sorts of plants grow in clay. So if you've got clay, the question will be, and this is getting a bit detailed now, but the question will be, if you're on clay, is why you're putting a liner in, and your soil conditions as well. So if you've got groundwater, so does everyone know what I mean by groundwater? So water's coming up through the ground, going up and down. You don't want to put a liner there, because it will come up under the liner. It can't get out because the liner's stopping it, and then it will bubble.
I'm on Box Hill. We don't.
You
don't get water when you go down, but we do have the clay.
Yeah. So clay's low nutrient.
Yeah. So that.
So that's okay. Yeah. But what you don't want to do is fill it full of compost from the garden centre, something that's high nutrient, because the plants don't need it, and you'll change the nutrient level of the soil, and you'll get loads of algae. So the bags that I made, I filled them basically. I managed to get some low nutrient pond compost. You can get compost for ponds that's low nutrient, but I mixed it 50-50 with a load of waste sharp sand that I'd got hold of, basically to save money, because they don't need the high nutrient level. But the plants like lilies and the plants that are growing at the bottom that come up to the top need something to anchor into, they need something to grow into. They're not all free floating. And the ones around the edge, so the marginal ones around the edge, are in the coir rolls. So does everyone know what I mean by coir? So it's like a coconut type product it's rolled up into a big thing, and that's enough medium, no compost or nutrients in it, that's enough for the plants to anchor into, and they're drawing the nutrients out of the water. So if you don't put any nutrients in the system, but you give them something to anchor to, they will constantly draw nutrients out of the water, and that will help prevent you getting algae, because they're taking the nutrient level out. Sorry, yeah.
You've talked extensively about the creation and the establishment of your pond Can you describe a little bit about what you do in terms of annual maintenance? Are there routines that you go through in terms of reducing plant volume or quite what you do to keep the pond?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm the right person to ask this, because if anyone's been to my garden and been at an open garden, they know I don't manage gardens in a normal way. So I don't do routine stuff, I tend to do catastrophic stuff. So I tend to let things go and then go in. But the one thing I do with ponds is I make sure that the leaf burden is not excessive, because leaf is constantly falling every year into the pond, will raise the nutrient level. That has two effects. It raises the nutrient level, so it creates you a potential problem with algae, but it also raises the amount of material in the pond, which will start to dry it out, because then the plants will spread out from the edges into those areas, and effectively that's a natural process. That's what happens with ponds naturally. They dry out. That is what generally, unless something's keeping them open, they will. That is the natural succession process. So effectively your management over time is about preventing that from happening. So that's about cutting back some of the vegetation that may be spreading into the pond. It's making sure that the leaf material doesn't build up too much in the pond. If you don't overfill it with material in the first place, then that process is slower, but it does still happen. So I'm in a situation, I was telling someone earlier, I missed the normal slot when I'm doing stuff last year through family issue. So I'm playing catch up now. But I'll tend to go in and clear a large amount, so I need to clear some of the marginal vegetation. So I'll go in and blitz it, and I'll be quite harsh with it, because this is how I used to manage nature reserves. Slash it right back, cut it right back, not back to the basic, but really back, and then let it recover again. And the reason I do that is that dynamic process is quite good for wildlife as well, because it creates things. So it really depends on how you look at your pond, how you want to look at it. If you've got a small pond, obviously you wouldn't do that, because you'd lose all your features. I've got the luxury of a slightly bigger one, so I can do that. But mainly it's about stuff getting in it. Just keep an eye on the vegetation, particularly
and this is quite a nice point to move on to. This is really good questions, but you're right about the small ponds, which a lot of us have got the smaller ponds, and this is a good opportunity to hear from Susie and Kevin about what it was like for them building their ponds. So, Kevin, do you want to take to the floor?
Yeah. I'm Kevin Clark. I live in Strood Green, part of Brockham, as you probably were aware. My pond is quite small compared to what you've seen in Paul's slides. However, I'd like to think that all the principles that Paul's been explaining have been adopted by me. I didn't have the benefit of a talk like this. I had to pick up all my knowledge off the internet, YouTube, over the years. But I suppose a game changer for me was going around to Paul's garden on an open day and me thinking, I could do that. It's not that difficult. So this is about 5 years ago. The first thing I did was create a wildflower patch. The first lockdown came along and I was working at home, and I spent a lot of time looking at the garden thinking, quite a lot of lawn and tidy borders. What else can I do? Because, okay, the wildflower patch attracted insects but didn't attract any birds, for example. So I thought, maybe a pond, and combination of going around to Paul's garden and a talk, I think in here, last May or June, and I got a pond starter kit, and this is my story. So I dug the hole in the garden. That's not my preferred location, but the advice on the internet generally was away from trees. Now, I think pinions vary, whether it should be shade, partly shaded by a tree. I put mine in almost the centre of the garden. Not the preferred position, but nevertheless, that's what I did. So that's okay. There's two levels really. There's a fairly deep in the centre level, and then round outside a shallow part. There's the liner. This was October last year in place, and you can see it in the centre, started collecting rainwater. Underneath the liner, I had towels. I didn't have any blanket, or the previous people hadn't left me any carpet in the loft. So I just raided my garage and found some old towels. I hope they won't rot. I probably will never know. I'm just trying to think of any other features. So the rocks were there to stop the line blowing away, I suppose. I think once it's got some water in it, it's quite heavy. So it would have been too late to have said, oh, I'd like the liner in a different position. As Paul was saying, it's been roughly cut to the shape I want, but it hasn't been cut exactly to the shape I want. So I think it's looking not very attractive at the moment, and the hole in the ground wasn't looking very attractive either. If you can go on to the next slide. And that's what it looks like now. Okay, that was a month ago. So the tall plant is the flag iris, yellow flag iris. I've got in the centre of the pond a lily. So the water is crystal clear. It really does work. With the pond starter kit were some plants. They haven't grown. In fact, you can hardly see them. Now, I'm wondering, is that, just what I've heard tonight, is that because the nutrient level is too high or too low? But I think on your experience, Simon, you were saying leave it a year and they'll grow. So, don't know. I've got what I suspect is some duckweed, and not algae. It's not very much, admittedly.
Yeah, little round green things.
Yeah, I think I'll just leave it. But I think the mistake I made was whenever a leaf fell in the pond, I took it out. I perhaps should have left it, because I suspect a little bit of nutrient is a good thing. And presumably the leaves, most of them, will eventually sink and provide a home at the bottom of the pond to whatever overwinters. So.
And did you pile your stuff up on the edge? It looks like you did.
I did, yeah, because on the first slide, at that time, I didn't quite know what to do with the soil. But then after a while, I thought, I'll pile up around the outside. And like Paul was saying, I didn't remove anything from the garden, nothing at all. It's all, and I haven't spent a single penny on preparing that garden. It was all gifts, all my labour. The lily was a birthday present, and the flag iris, someone gave it away. I advertised on Free Cycle for pond plants. So I'm not suggesting that everyone here thinks about spending nothing, but it's possible. And I would say you could, although it took me quite a while, I didn't have a lot of spare time, I suspect you could create, not that, but the during in about a week. So in a week from now, you could have a pond. And when it rains, it starts filling with water. When will it rain? Well, not this month, so you've got a week or two to get it in place. Okay, thank you.
The thing I like about that slide is, you remember what I said about cover next to the pond? So Kevin's got like a little rampy bit at the back there, so stuff can climb out, and immediately it's into cover vegetation, and it can access the area over to the top left-hand corner of the slide. So there's a protective area. It's not having to go across open grass, and so anything that's coming in and out feels safe coming in and out, whether that's insects or amphibians or reptiles or birds.
Yeah, so what I didn't say, thank you for reminding me, that leads to a natural habitat. When I didn't create it, it was there. But yeah, mammals can hide in there if they so wish. Thank you, Kevin. Susie?
Yeah. Well, if we just hear from Susie and then we'll take some questions. Yeah, great.
Hi there, I'm Susie Stevens. I moved to Betchworth about 2 years ago. I moved to the Coombe, and I acquired a beautiful garden. It's long and thin and it slopes upwards. I've got beautiful woods at the top. I've acquired a mature wildflower meadow, and there's lots of different pockets for wildlife. But having attended a talk here early last year, it became apparent I didn't have any water features, and that would be a good idea to attract more wildlife and increase biodiversity. So thought about a location in my steep, or not steep, but certainly sloping garden. And coincidentally, I was excavating a flower bed at the time. It's not huge, probably about 2-3 metres by 1-2 metres. But as I excavated that flower bed, I discovered that there had previously been a fish pond underneath it. So not an ideal situation for a wildlife garden, but I figured, okay, with the limited resources I had, that was going to be where it was going to be, especially because the plants and the pond liner that came from the 4Bs arrived extremely promptly, so I kind of thought, well, I better get on with this. So I excavated this flower bed, got deeper, deeper, deeper. I did need some help actually securing the liner, and also converting it from a fish pond, which is basically deep with steep sides, having shelves put in. And on these shelves I put baskets with aquatic soil, and I put the plants in those at different levels. Then I created, the photos up here. So you can see the baskets are at the top, on the left-hand side photograph. You can't actually see them that well because they're sort of semi-submerged. But beyond that, you can see lots of rocks. So I created a sort of a rocky, shallow area where invertebrates can climb out. And I've also put lots of logs around it so that animals and wildlife can exit and enter the pond. At the top right-hand corner, there's a big old tree stump. I left that in deliberately, and I've surrounded it by logs and all sorts of debris. And that connects really well to, you can't see it in the photograph, another wild area of the garden. So, you know, you've got somewhere for invertebrates to hibernate over winter, and a sort of a bit of a link to the other parts of the garden, bearing in mind that the rest of it is, you know, paving slabs really. What else did I do? I did put a little bit of sand at the bottom, and everything really took very, very quickly, really well. It just really worked so quickly. So before I knew it, I had mosquito larvae and pond skaters. Immediately, I put pickerel in there and a water lily. The water lily hasn't done very well, but I think that's because I didn't have too much for it to bed in at the bottom. But the pickerel immediately attracted dragonflies. And this year, the dragonflies and the damselflies have been fantastic. Just sit there and watch them for hours. Absolutely lovely. Yeah, with the insects, there were bees and wasps and, as I say, mosquito larvae. That brought the birds. All sorts of birds come and visit. The foxes come and visit. I have got newts in there, so I've seen adult newts and baby newts, so I'm delighted with that. I did do a bit of a naughty thing. I had some frog spawn from a friend's pond, but actually I think the newts ate the frogs, the frog spawn, or certainly the tadpoles. So I have seen frogs around the garden, but I don't know whether they came from my new pond or what. But anyway, I've also had slow worms, yeah, and all sorts of wildlife. It's been absolutely fantastic. So,
a really big lizard.
Pardon?
Really big lizard.
Yes, yes. The photo on the right was taken not that long ago, and those are the plants I planted a year ago, and they've established really, really quickly, really, yeah, I just left them to it. I have had a problem with algae and a little bit of duckweed, so from time to time I just take a scoop out, I put it on the side, let any animals just crawl out, and after a couple of days when it's dried out, then I remove it and put it away. But, oh, and also because it's been such a dry summer, the pond level, the water level going down has been a bit of an issue. And I kind of resisted for as long as I could, topping it up. But I kind of, yeah, wanted it topped up, and I wanted the pond liner to actually be covered. So I had great big trugs of water, tap water, which I left for several days, and then I would feed that into the pond. So not just pure tap water, but left it for a bit. And that seemed to do the trick. So yeah, I know it's not a wildlife pond in the true sense, but it really has attracted a lot of wildlife to the garden, and I love it. And it's been, yeah, it's given me lots of pleasure.
Thank you, Susie. Sorry to interrupt your question. This is a good time now to ask away.
It was really, probably relevant to both, but the first garden, was it the same size one-liner that we're getting?
2.5, yeah, I think it was. Norman?
Yes, it's very small.
And can you remember roughly what, because I'm in the middle of creating, can you remember roughly what your dimensions were? I'm going roughly circular.
Well, I can't. However, I did try and guess what a circular, well, it comes with a square-shaped liner. But when you cut it in circular, what that would look like when it's pressed down to the bottom level. And so don't assume you can have a pond 2.5 metre diameter. No. It's going to be about that sort of size. It's sort of about 1.5.
You can back calculate. There's a formula for it.
Right.
So we could back calculate. If you tell me how big the liner is, I can tell you how.
Yeah, 2.5 metres square.
Yeah.
I had to buy a bigger liner for mine, and mine's about 2-3 metres by 1-2 metres.
Okay. And I reckon with 2.5 by 2.5 you can get about half a metre depth in the middle bit.
Well, I went a little bit more, but yes, it was 0.75 or whatever. I did try and calculate it, but then hey ho, when you dig, soil crumbles, and I wasn't measuring it to the millimetre anyway. I was doing it with one eye.
Any other questions?
A couple of things really. There was discussion about planting. So on a small pond, you can actually low nutrient compost is affordable when you have the little planting trays. So rather than filling the whole pond, so it becomes affordable that you can do that. So you can actually plant it. I chose to use Hessian bags because someone gave me a whole load of sandbags basically. But it's the same process, you just fill them, and with your water lily you could do that. You could take it out, put them in a Hessian bag, and then, so I've got some if you need one, so you could, and then replant it with that. The other thing is about, you're quite right about frog spawn. So if you get newts, just be prepared. It's very exciting when you get newts, just be prepared, they predate on other amphibians. They'll eat the frog spawn and they'll eat the tadpoles.
What about the dragonfly larvae?
They do as well.
Oh, they eat the tadpoles as well? Yeah. Okay.
Don't stand a chance.
Circle of Life. Do you remember the movie?
Yeah.
On a small scale.
So I have quite a large pond at one end of the garden that has newts, so no frogs, lots of dragonfly larvae, and that's all lovely. So I'm putting this, I want a small pond at the other end of the garden, and I'm hoping that I'll get frogs, not newts, because I love frogs. But I don't want to be nasty about the newts. So, it's kind of 100 yards plus apart. So
you may well do. So we had that. So our pond has matured, and we've had, I said, a great crested newt female, gravid female in there, but we had smooth newts. So the frogs came, but they didn't ever. So a neighbour gave us an old sandpit. And we created a sandpit pond with basically a bucket, and the frogs went in there.
Lovely.
And the newts didn't go in there. So
that's what I'm hoping. And also, I haven't seen a toad. There were toads when we moved in. I haven't seen toads for 3 or 4 years. So I'm hoping we might get toads. Because they need somewhere to spawn as well.
Yeah.
It's amazing to hear how many newts there are.
Yeah, there are a lot. Every time you pick up a log,
right.
But they move over big distances. So unlike frogs and toads to some extent, they move much further distances. So great crested newts will go kilometres.
Okay.
So whereas toads tend to stick where they are, and the frogs similar. So
most of this is my little connection or link to the last piece of tonight's event. That newts, most of those who responded to the pond survey had newts in their pond. It's amazing. So this is this is just to sort of finish things off for you. Obviously, it's great to hear the stories about your ponds and you know, ponds in the community here. The 4Bs is, yes, we're trying to increase biodiversity, but also we want to know if we're making a difference. We want to measure, are we actually increasing biodiversity? And so I'm going to show you a few, just introduce you to some of the data that we're getting back. The first piece of data I want to share with you is the project that Kevin and Susie were involved with last year, where they were 2 of the 11 local residents who took a pond starter kit away. And yeah, thank you, Paul. So we actually distributed 11 kits. 7 of those individuals got back to me and told me about what's been going on for them. I'm pleased to say that 6 of them completed their ponds, and one of them, I've seen the pictures there, they've got a digger in, and so God knows what they're going to finish up with. But so that's really successful. Some of the new biodiversity and wildlife that have come to those ponds are things like goldfinches, mosquito larvae we've heard tonight, frog spawn, there's the newts, and someone wrote back and said, I'm getting something that visits at night and it's disturbing the pebbles. So there's all sorts going on. The interesting thing though was that the kit provided the impetus to act, but the motivation behind all of this was the community's desire to have biodiversity and to help wildlife. So this seems to be a common thread. And you can see there that the most common challenge was the digging. So yeah, so I think one of the things, one of the things I'd like to do is see if I can help us, those of us who build ponds, perhaps we can communicate with each other and share resources. I know Kevin and I have already been sharing resources, so if there's more of us, we can all help each other.
With digging.
With digging. Paul, should we have a quick look at the numbers from this year's Pond for Nature survey? 37 responders contributed to this, and you can see on the graph on the right hand side, yeah, newts, 62% of the 37 responders, so over half of them had newts that they'd observed in their ponds. But the most popular or the most common biodiversity is the insects with wings, insects that live on the surface, and insects that live under the surface. So those were the most common. Shortly followed by pond snails and worms. And I know from my own experience, Anne, that's our pond just suddenly had millions of those, didn't they? Millions is a little extreme. But, the other thing that I noticed in the results was some of the other animals that were visiting, including a mink, cormorant, badgers. We've seen grass snakes already, hedgehog, which was great to see. Hedgehogs are really suffering, and spiders and bats. So this is, we can tell from the feedback that we're getting that this is all working and we're having an impact. And obviously next year we can measure it again and see what's changing.
Simon?
Yeah.
Just a quick prompt, if you're looking for wildlife, it's about doing it at the right time. So if you want to monitor amphibians in your pond, do it at night with a torch. You will see very little during the day. The reason I know we have so many toads breeding is because I'm a saddo and I'm out there in the dark, sitting there with a torch while the rest of my family laughs at me waiting for them, and then I'm spotting them and going out every night during the season till you get to that point, because toads will tend to breed on 1 or 2 nights. If you don't see that, then you'll assume you don't have toads, because they hide most of the time, and you might find them when you're gardening. So it's just about monitoring at the right time, in the right way.
I find if I sit down by the pond in a thunderstorm, things come out as well, which is really lovely. They come out to play in the wet.
Most of the responders to last year's project said that the rewards from putting the pond in are massive. Just wildlife, being able to watch all the wildlife going on. On that note, last slide, if you wouldn't mind, Paul. Yeah, so Norman is our technical guru, and he's been taking the data from this year's survey and starting to plot where all the ponds are. And once we've completed that, we're going to publish this on the website, I think, where we can all take an interest in, you know, the spread of you know, water habitats in our community. And again, as we see perhaps some progress with the pond starter kits, perhaps we'll see that growing as well, which would be awesome. So Paul, thank you for that. A few other thank yous to Susie and Kevin. Thank you for sharing your stories. Paul, thank you for educating us. Anne and Lindsay, thank you for making the tea, and Richard for chairs and tables and pond kits. Last but not least, thank you to all of you. And if you feel inspired in any way to help people and nature thrive together, you could sign up for a free pond starter kit of your own. Richard will be glad to take your name and email so that we can arrange that for you. So, Paul, you're going to...
Yeah, just one last thing, which is that slide, just about information. So, I'm going to send this to Norman. Oh. So there'll be a copy of the presentation as a PDF form. The group has prepared that information on the left-hand side, which some of you may already had, but I've also got a PDF version of that document, which is a really lovely, easily accessible document that covers everything you want to know about ponds and wildlife in your garden. So I'll be giving that to Norman. He will.
Can I say one final word, and that is Trevor has generously donated a lot of tubers, water in the tubers, are on the floor, and the offer is just to pick one up, two up, and take them home with you.
I'm not taking them home.
So thank you, Trevor. Good donations, it's great.
Thank you. Thanks, Norman. Thanks, everyone.